Camilla didn't just cross the line, she shattered it. And now the royal family is in crisis. 'Cause what started as a quiet act of entitlement has spiraled into the biggest royal betrayal since the days of Diana herself. It all unraveled in public, in pearls, and under the sharp eyes of the one woman who wouldn't let it slide, Princess Catherine. And when the truth came out, King Charles had no choice. He stepped in. But was it too little, too late? Let's rewind, because this story begins with a heist, silent, deliberate, and deeply personal. Early one morning in June 2025, inside the secure vaults of Kensington Palace, Princess Catherine was reviewing heirloom inventory for a private family exhibit. It was supposed to be routine, selecting pieces to eventually be passed down to Princess Charlotte, preserving Diana's memory. But then, something didn't add up. Two of the most precious items, Diana's iconic pearl choker and the legendary Qatar earrings, were gone. Gone. No record, no explanation, and certainly no permission. But Catherine didn't panic. She knew this wasn't a clerical error. It was a breach, a betrayal. Someone had reached into the legacy Diana left behind for her granddaughter and tried to rewrite it. By 7:45 a.m., the royal vault teams were discreetly searching 3 properties. The vault hadn't been tampered with, and no one had signed anything out. Whoever did this knew how to move quietly, and had access. Catherine said nothing publicly. She didn't storm out. She didn't point fingers. But privately, she and Prince William knew exactly what this meant. This wasn't about jewels. This was about Diana. And more than that, it was about Charlotte's future. And that's when the silence started to crack. Just 2 days later, during a royal luncheon at Buckingham Palace, the truth came crashing into the room. Not through whispers, but in diamonds. Laura Lopez, Camilla's daughter, walked in wearing them. Diana's missing earrings. 3 pearls, unmistakable design, gifted by the Emir of Qatar to Diana herself. Pearls that hadn't been seen in public for over a decade. And there they were, hanging from the ears of a woman who had no right to them. Catherine saw it instantly. Her blood ran cold. She didn't need confirmation, but she asked for it anyway. Her assistant retrieved the digital archive. The match was exact. 1986 Emir of Qatar. Diamond threading. Serial coded. No doubt. No escape. Catherine stood up. In front of over 30 guests, she looked Laura in the eyes and asked one question. "What are you wearing?" Laura stumbled. "A gift from Mother." Camilla, seated nearby, went pale. And that's when the walls of silence came down. William arrived. The earrings were seized and taken for immediate examination by a palace gemologist. Under magnification, every detail matched. Serial number, craftsmanship, clasps. They were the originals. There was no longer a question of ifs, only why. What came next was chaos wrapped in protocol. Palace scrambled to contain the fallout, but it was too late. The story had legs and teeth. Staff began whispering. Aides started checking inventories. And by the next morning, June 21st, Camilla's defense was already unraveling. She claimed she gave the earrings to her daughter after buying them at a private auction years ago. But when pressed, there was no receipt, no documentation, no memory of where they were supposedly bought. And it didn't take long for palace investigators to cross-reference every major auction house in Europe. The earrings were never sold. Not publicly, not privately. They were never hers to give. And then came the smoking gun. Security logs showed that on April 9, 2025, just weeks before the disappearance, Camilla entered the heirloom vault area completely alone. No scheduled tour, no documented reason, no witnesses. She said she was doing heritage research, but there was no research on the calendar, and no one had authorized her access. William called a private meeting that same night. He heard Camilla's version. He listened. Then he looked his advisors in the eye and said just 6 words. "That's not an error. That's theft." And King Charles? Silent, hesitant, tucked between duty and disaster. But William and Catherine had already decided. If the crown wouldn't protect Diana's legacy, they would. 2 days later, on June 23rd, the press caught wind of the scandal. Times ran a front-page headline, "Queen's family linked to missing Diana jewels." Anonymous palace sources confirmed the items were meant for Princess Charlotte. Public erupted. Royal social media exploded with fury. One comment said it best, You didn't just steal earrings, you stole from Diana's granddaughter. The outrage was immediate, and so was the consequence. William drafted a royal directive revoking Camilla's access to all royal heirloom archives and ceremonial planning. She was cut off from any future involvement in Diana's legacy. Her role, while technically still queen consort, was functionally erased. And that's when King Charles finally stepped in. Reports from palace insiders say Charles was visibly shaken and emotionally torn. He had protected Camilla for decades, through scandal, public backlash, and institutional criticism. But this was a direct violation of the very legacy that held the monarchy together. Not just as a family, but as a symbol. Behind closed doors, Charles approved the measures William had already set in motion. Camilla was no longer allowed inside Kensington's private residences. Her security access was downgraded. Her role in royal events was quietly cancelled. It wasn't a press release. It wasn't an apology. But it was clear. She was out. Aides called it an internal exile. No throne room drama, no tabloid photo ops. Just absence. Camilla was erased. Not physically removed, but completely removed from influence. And Katherine? She said nothing. Instead, on July 1, 2025, she personally oversaw the relocking of Diana's vault. The new system allowed access only to her and Charlotte's designated steward. Not even William had direct entry. It was a quiet act, but a thunderous message. Diana's legacy would be guarded, not shared. Inside the vault, Katherine left a handwritten note. For Charlotte, love, Mommy. That was it. No statement to the press. No dramatic speech. Just action. The nation noticed. Polls from July 3rd showed Katherine's approval rating soar to 82%, her highest ever. Camilla's? A record low, just 29%. Even longtime monarchists began to turn, realizing this wasn't about power plays or tabloid drama. This was about legacy. This was about Diana. And Camilla had violated it. But the fallout didn't stop there. 'Cause once Camilla's theft became public, so did her past. The affair, the phone call tapes, the old whispers from 1993 and 1997. The media went into overdrive. Camilla was no longer seen as a modernizing queen or a symbol of redemption. She was once again the villain, the usurper, and for many it felt like justice, decades late but finally delivered. Meanwhile, Katherine stood taller than ever, a pillar of quiet dignity. She never retaliated. She didn't gloat. She simply protected what mattered. And the public saw that. On July 4th, William made the final call. A sweeping order barred all non-Wales family members from accessing heirloom or wardrobe archives. Laura Lopez, Camilla's daughter, was blacklisted. Diana's legacy wasn't just sentimental now. It was legally protected, permanently enshrined in royal policy. And Charles? He watched. Not with anger, not with power, but with resignation. He had tried to balance love with legacy, but the crown didn't choose love, it's memory. And memory had chosen Katherine. People were loud. Hashtags like #DianaForever, #ProtectCharlotte, and #CamillaOut trended worldwide. Meme culture turned brutal, but the monarchy didn't respond. They didn't need to, because Camilla wasn't just caught, she was erased. By history, by the people, by the real queen in waiting. Katherine never took the crown from Camilla. She didn't have to. Public gave it to her. And as she walks beside Charlotte, no pearls needed, no headlines required, it's clear. The legacy Diana left behind is no longer vulnerable. It's locked, guarded, and finally home. But the question everyone kept asking wasn't just how Camilla got access. It was why. Why would the queen consort, already draped in jewels, already sitting beside the king, feel the need to reach for something that wasn't hers? The answer wasn't about sparkle. It wasn't about fashion. It was about power. Diana's jewelry, particularly those two pieces, had always been more than royal accessories. They were relics of loyalty, symbols of an emotional reign that outshone any crown. For Camilla to touch them, to steal them, wasn't about beauty. It was about claiming what Diana left behind. But Katherine was never going to let that happen. And the palace, once paralyzed by protocol, had started moving. Fast. Behind the scenes, William and Katherine commissioned a full security overhaul of the heirloom system. Every piece Diana wore was now tagged, logged, and digitally recorded. A task force of 7 aides was formed solely to monitor rotations, preservation, and transfers. It was unprecedented and personal. The choker, now recovered and returned, was placed under heightened surveillance. Not for display, not for use. For legacy. The message was simple. Diana's story wouldn't be stolen again. Meanwhile, Camilla's world shrank. Her usual appointments were quietly pulled. Her name was absent from upcoming events. Invitations dried up, and the palace press office issued a subtle but noticeable change. Press releases began referring to Queen Camilla less, some not at all, and in the public eye, she was done. The headlines turned brutal. She tried to rewrite Diana's history. The queen who was never chosen, erased by the past she ignored. Even longtime supporters began walking back their defenses. Royal commentators admitted on air that the crown had made a mistake elevating her so quickly, so absolutely. And while no official demotion came, the silence was louder than any statement. Across social media, a wave of support for Katherine surged. Edits of Diana's gala photos crossfade into Charlotte's beaming school appearances. Quotes from Diana's speeches were posted beside pictures of Katherine overseeing vault protection, and in every thread the same words echoed. Diana's legacy is safe. Charlotte has her grandmother's fire. Katherine is the real queen now. But perhaps the most powerful moment came not from the palace, but from the people. Letters, thousands of them, from New Zealand to Nigeria, Canada to Cyprus. Handwritten notes, cool drawings, photographs of Diana clipped from 90s magazines with words like, "She's still with us," scribbled underneath. And Katherine saw them all. One note in particular stood out, sent by an 82-year-old woman in British Columbia. It read, "I was your grandmother's age when she walked into that palace. I'm your age now. Charlotte, protect your heart, because one day you'll wear her strength." And that's what made the public turn irreversible. Camilla's theft was the trigger. But Katherine's response was the reason. She didn't campaign. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She protected. She planned. And slowly, silently, she shifted the center of the monarchy from pomp to principle. Even inside palace walls, the change was clear. More aides were requesting transfers to Kensington. Clarence House began operating with reduced staff. Camilla's wing at Buckingham Palace remained unused for weeks. One senior staffer was overheard saying, "It feels like 2 crowns now, but only one is real." Charles remained mostly out of view. His once confident public schedule trimmed down. Whispers began to grow louder. Was the king losing his grip? Or worse, losing the trust of his son? And that's when William did something no one expected. He spoke, not to the press, not to the public, but to his staff. At an internal heirloom strategy session previously attended by his father, his stepmother, and the Queen herself. This year, only William and Katherine walked in, and according to those in the room, he opened with this: "We're not here to preserve jewelry, we're here to preserve character." He then paused, looked around. Diana's story doesn't need to be rewritten, it just needs to be remembered. The room went silent. But outside, the public was already echoing the sentiment. YouGov polling placed William and Katherine as the most trusted royal figures worldwide. Their influence was no longer aspirational, it was foundational. They weren't just representing the crown, they were redefining it. And in a monarchy where legacy is everything, that meant everything. Meanwhile, Camilla faced a truth she could no longer outrun. Old friends stopped calling. Former PR allies refused interviews. Her appearances became sparse, her smiles rehearsed. Even at garden parties and charity dinners, guests noticed how the conversation shifted when she entered. Not out of formality, but discomfort, 'cause everyone knew. And while she remained technically queen, the symbolic weight of that title had vanished. Not with a bang, but with a whisper named Katherine. By mid-July, photos surfaced of Katherine and Charlotte planting flowers in the Kensington Gardens. Smiling, genuine, serene. No security flanks, no fanfare, just family. And yet, the moment was louder than any speech. Because while Camilla faded into palace shadows, Katherine stood rooted in public respect. She wasn't just the Duchess of Cambridge anymore. She wasn't just the Princess of Wales. She was the keeper of Diana's memory. and the public at last had found their queen. But this story doesn't end with shame or even revenge. It ends with resolve, because what Camilla tried to take was never really hers. She wore the crown, she had the title, but she never earned the trust. And that's the one thing Katherine holds now, unshakable, unchallenged, and fully hers. So as the vaults remained sealed, the earrings returned and the pearls quietly polished, not for fashion but for future, one thing becomes crystal clear. The monarchy's future isn't defined by who sits on the throne, it's defined by who carries the memory. And in that battle, there is no longer any doubt. Katherine didn't just protect Diana's legacy, she became it.